Hi, Fred.
Okay.
How are you?
Well, thanks. And you?
Fine, thank you.
I'm having COVID without symptoms.
Oh, headache and all that stuff?
No symptoms.
Oh,
Lucky.
yeah. I got to get my teeth. I'm waiting for a couple of implants, so.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I have a gap. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Who was that?
Father Frank Daly from this diocese.
Oh,
But he went to Rome. He was a year behind me. And he was a priest for several years, and then he left the priesthood and married.
and then he came back.
And then he came back.
That's easy. What's his name again? Daly?
Frank Daly, yeah. And he's retired now.
For 10 days. I retired 10 days ago.
Oh, you heard me tell her.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
It's kind of like I'm at sea. I don't know exactly. I haven't adjusted yet. I gotta, get a schedule, and I'm kind of focused a little bit on resting for this month, and then, but I can't rest forever. It's just.
True. Did you know Father Michael Himes?
No, I knew I met his brother a number of times, Ken.
Yeah, Ken's a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
But we just got news today that Michael Himes died.
Oh, I knew he was ill. Yeah.
Seriously.
He was a diocese, Brooklyn diocese, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. So I had an exchange with Rick Gallardi this week, and he's giving what he calls the last lecture.
Are you kidding?
No, on September 23rd, he's talking about reform in the church, and it's called the last lecture.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that. So
Yeah.
he's resigning.
Well, he said the last lecture, if he's still here to give it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the illness is so serious. It's
gee.
pancreatic cancer. So his
I'm praying for him.
Huh?
I've been praying for him.
I have too. Yeah. Yeah. I took a course with him. It was very interesting because it was on Vatican II. And of course, I was a year behind you, and I was there for two of the last two sessions.
Right.
And all the other students in the class weren't born in Vatican II. And so Rick was talking about, I'd go up to him and said, he'd talk about Angel Anton and Rene Laterelle and Frank Sullivan and Joe Fuchs. I said, I had all of them in class.
Yeah, all our buddies.
Yeah.
I didn't have Anton though.
I had Angel Anton, yeah. So.
What, do you remember what he taught you?
I think it was ecclesiology too, I think, a form of ecclesiology, I think, but I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah.
I know, because our initial course in ecclesiology was by Frank Sullivan.
Yeah, that's who I had for.
Who just amazingly just died this past year. So.
Yeah. Wonderful guy.
Yeah, he was 96.
George and Fred, I bring you greetings from Tom Cotton.
Oh, thank you. Please return ours to him. He's still as handsome as ever.
I think you're right. and he and Betty are so active. Hi, Ned.
Hey, John. Frank.
Anyway, Tom Cotton called to talk about a reception. Larry Shelton.
George.
Oh, yeah.
And so I tried to, it was a very short, because I have another appointment on Tuesday of next week. But apparently a lot of classmates from that group are gathering to remember Larry Shelton.
Oh.
Shelton?
Yeah.
What's her name?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
see William Dubé died recently.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, there's a nice tribute from his sister. Fred, I could send it to you.
Thank you. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, Frank, do you know who Bill DeBay is?
No. Should I?
Yeah. Yeah,
he
I
was
think
famous here in Southern California, wasn't he?
Yeah, what was the title of his book? He sent a letter to the Pope that Cardinal McIntyre should be removed from office.
Ah,
And this is while he was still a parish priest.
my predecessor at Our Lady of Sorrows, not the immediate one, also galvanized about 58 priests in Boston to send a letter to Cardinal Law urging him to resign.
Ah, uh-huh.
Wow.
Well, that's good if you have 58. That's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
He can't very well fire everybody.
No, he resigned.
He did.
Took their advice. Yeah.
By the way, George Crook has asked me to remind you that he's in court at 10 o'clock today. And he'll try to get out of there as quickly as he can and get on the phone with us. Just housekeeping here.
Thanks, Ned.
Thank you. Hi, Bob.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Bob.
I see California with respect to bishops is in the news again. John Dolan has been appointed the Bishop of Phoenix, the auxiliary bishop in San Diego.
Oh,
I saw that today.
Ah,
So they're focused on San Diego for some reason.
Yeah,
did he
think
become a bishop under McElroy?
yeah.
He's the auxiliary under McElroy.
So McElroy got him ordained.
No, he's not from that. He's not from the San Diego diocese originally, I don't think.
Oh,
Oh, you mean ordained a bishop?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I'm not sure. But I don't think he's a San Diego priest.
Mhm.
still Pope Francis is spreading the McElroy influence.
Well, certainly if it, especially in Phoenix, Bishop Olmsted is an anti-Francis. The retiring Bishop of Phoenix,
And he just hit 75, right?
right?
He did the right thing.
George Farrick, come back to us.
Okay.
We miss you. When we
There
don't
you
see you,
are.
we miss you.
Am I back?
Actually, you moved from the right to the left.
Yeah, I don't know where I am.
You were too far to the right before. Now you, where you,
Well, I'm glad I saw the light.
you've been changing hats too. What's up?
Yeah, this one is, I'm in the backyard with Moby, who's, maybe I'll show there's Moby over there. You see him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're in the backyard. It's hot here. While let me know if there's any background noise or somebody with a weed whacker or something outside. So if so, I'll move. Yeah. So
At the beginning,
Fred,
Fred
I
and
read,
Frank
I
were talking.
went through your Monument Opus twice.
What was that, George?
Fred had sent out a copy of his synodality paper. Fred, are you still there?
Yep.
Yeah, he's right
Okay.
there.
Yeah. And I sent some comments to you. They were just,
Oh, thank you.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
I look forward to looking at them.
yeah.
They were good comments.
I have to confess that it was a pretty heavy duty paper for me to read. Not being in it so forth.
Is that sent to everybody?
Yeah. Yeah, did you get it?
Yeah, I got it.
I got it.
You should have gotten it, Bob.
I
I
don't
have the
recall getting
Willamette
it.
thing.
I don't recall getting it either. So
Oh,
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I got this thing from about Willamette,
Yes.
yeah,
but I don't think I got Fred's thing.
Okay, I could forward it to you now.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like to have it. Anything Fred does, I want to read.
Frank too,
If I
George.
can.
You,
Yeah, here it is. I'm forwarding it to you. Okay,
George, shoot it over to Frank too.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, George.
Yeah. For sure.
Did Gary tell us he was going to be gone?
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't either.
Did any of you watch the panel last night, the presentation about January 6th?
yeah,
I didn't.
No, but I heard about Barr.
I recorded it so I could watch it later.
Oh, that's good. Boy, you know, if anything here doesn't stick, then there's no there, I guess. Barr was very unequivocal, as I understand it. I didn't see it. And Congresswoman, oh, what's her name?
Haney.
Yeah, she was pretty clear herself. Of course, she's tainted material or persona as far as the right conservatives think.
Now, I watched the whole thing. I thought it was really, really well done. That congressman who's the chair of it, Benny something.
Thompson,
Pardon?
Thompson.
Thompson.
Yeah, really ran it well. And then Cheney is very, very articulate and very calm, but boy, very direct. And I think they put that whole thing together to put from here and there and there. And I think when they got Barr and they got Trump's daughter and
Yes.
his son-in-law, I mean, that he was hung on the hook there and he didn't know it.
And
And it was very clear that Trump was orchestrating from the White House, but his favorites were down there at his instruction, and he had no intention to be present. He wanted it to appear spontaneous, and that's the big thing I took away from the little piece I watched. Was it was far from spontaneous. It was very much orchestrated from Trump.
well, and Cheney, I think, laid that out by saying there are 7 hearings and there are 7 separate elements that were orchestrated, not just the riot. There were a number of other things that happened that were orchestrated from the White House to overturn the election. So it wasn't just a one-time event. I thought she was compelling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually.
Do you have any feeling that Trump is in danger of criminal prosecution?
I do.
I mean, I think that it's a possibility, but whether or not they'll do it is the question.
Yeah, that's my wonderment. No president apparently has ever been criminally indicted, and they would perhaps have be loath to do that.
But no other president has done what he did. If this is
That's
so,
true.
I saw a commentator on TV this morning, Baker from the New York Times, I think, talking about how there'd been other malfeasance of presidents, but nobody who has tried to subvert the elected process, just as Trump has done. That's a unique thing that he's done.
Yeah.
I think that Congress cannot, criminalize him, but the Justice Department can.
Yeah.
So this is just a committee to come up with information. Here's the plan. And I think the Secretary of Justice, he's quite clear. I think he was the guy that was supposed to go to the Supreme Court that what's his good name from down in
Merrick, yeah, Merrick
McConnell.
Garland was, yeah.
yeah, McConnell, he just stonewalled him getting in. And then, Biden put him into the Justice Department, and he's quite clear. He will follow where the information leads. He's not out to get him, but he's going to deal with the facts. And if it calls for it, I think they will impeach him or put him in prison. I'm not sure what they do.
I had the thought this morning, I wonder what his hair will look like if he's imprisoned.
Well, he
Oh,
can,
it'll match his,
I mean,
his,
even,
his jumpsuit.
even in prison, you get orange juice every morning.
Oh,
Merrick Garland, he's too slow for the political process, but that doesn't mean he's ineffective. He was the lead lawyer in the Oklahoma City bombing,
oh,
who followed that through to the end, through the prosecution.
Well, that's hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has staying power, but he's not flashy, and he's a classic judge. He's staying power, not flashy. So if he has decided in his mind that there's enough there to criminally prosecute Trump, he will get prosecuted. I think the bigger likelihood is that he will be indicted either in Atlanta or in New York for his business malfeasance, or the clear attempt to influence the election in Georgia, looking for 11,800 votes or whatever.
The electoral process has, over the history of our country, always been screwed around with. Jack Kennedy's father got the mafia to stuff, so to speak, boxes just way out of proportion, and they all kind of patted one another on the back for buying Jack's vote in Illinois. So I wonder whether, knowing that, they want to make an example of him, because they might hang themselves on their own, what is it, petard? On the other hand, what about making an example of such an egregious misuse of power and ambition?
I had never seen or heard of the police officer who testified last
The
evening.
woman police
Yeah.
officer,
Yeah.
it was very good.
Well, yeah, when she described it as a war scene, something far beyond her training and anything that she'd ever encountered, that was really quite striking to
And
me.
the video clips really supported that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Gary.
Morning, good morning.
Gary.
Hi, Gary.
She got knocked down and knocked out herself. And then
Yes,
got back up.
she still hasn't returned to duty.
Oh, Gary,
So-
we're talking about the hearing last night,
Right, it was-
January 6th.
It was riveting, it was interesting. My brother-in-law and my sister were, this is one of my sisters, they were gonna watch something Survivor or something or other. It's a Netflix deal. I don't know what it's called. It's not the Survivor that's on there. And they ended up watching this because it was on all the major news networks, except apparently for Fox News, which refused to show it. And apparently also, according to Heather Cox Richardson, wouldn't allow, they didn't have any commercial breaks during Tucker Carlson's show, so that people would not be channel surfing and accidentally catch.
Oh,
the-
really? Oh,
Yeah. But I mean, I was just thinking because my brother-in-law, who's very meat and potatoes kind of a guy, he's 85, he's not a political guy. He said he'd never seen those scenes that they chose were chilling. We've not seen that kind of those kind of scenes really. We'd seen things like it, but not up close the way they showed it. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm hoping that the word gets out, because you don't know how many people really watch this. I mean, people like ourselves did, but did the people, a lot of people who are not, I don't know, who are more concerned about inflation and things like that, did they watch it too? I mean, I don't know. I hope the word gets out to say that was riveting, because it was riveting television. It was well done, very well done.
YouTube should probably have the whole thing, don't you think?
I would guess,
Yeah.
hope so.
Me too. Me too.
But I
A
was,
question came up later. Is it the Proud Boys that are so active in Miami that the Republican Party is extremely powerful down there? Anybody know about that?
I think you're right. And they control the Republican Party in that section of Miami. I'm not sure they control the whole state, but
I see.
that was affirmed in the MSNBC commentary after the 2-hour session was over.
I think that's where I picked it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't there a comment that involved in all this somewhere along the line, the Proud Boys membership increased threefold?
Threefold.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if it was after this or before this or what sparked that, but
it was
maybe.
it was before it, I think, and it was when Trump sent out some kind of tweet, I think, is when the Proud Boys membership, it tripled before that incident, before January 6th.
It was in December, I'm quite sure.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
He sent
Was
out
that
a
when
tweet about
Trump
this.
said stand by?
Yes, stand back and stand by.
Yeah.
We all saw that on that debate.
And there was a caucus that Trump showed up with a couple of those guys. And of course, he was not supposed to be in dialogue with them, but in fact he was. And they have that fact there. And it was at the end of that he sent out a tweet inviting, the Proud Boys and the other group too, I think, but mostly the Proud Boys, to stand up and stand by, or however that goes. And that's when it tripled.
He had a meeting with Giuliani and 3 or 4 other people. It was a private meeting that he had, and it was after that meeting that he sent out that tweet in December.
You got it. Mhm.
That's when it tripled. Yeah.
I don't know whether what I'm about to tell you was part of the hearing or not, but I think NPR interviewed a whole bunch of people who said Trump has only asked 2 things of me: one, to vote for him, which I proudly did, and the other was to come.
Yes.
And person after person after person kept saying stuff like, I was going to be there because he asked me to, et cetera. It's pretty unequivocal again. Because of our, at least mine, and I'm sure most of us, point of view, we're very sympathetic to MSNBC and how to interpret all this stuff. But my God, the guys on the right are so obtuse, it seems like, that it's hard at all to make a dent.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm wondering if it would be, if my sister and brother-in-law ended up watching this thing, I get, because every major news organization had it.
Yeah.
It would be pretty hard for people not to know about it.
Yeah.
And at least I thought it was, again, and I agree with you, Ned. They just put it all, it's that stuff we've already believed in. They just put it all in a package, and
Right.
they put Trump at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And they laid out a step-by-step case for how it was. And we're going to hear more about how it was started. I mean, this was the outline of what they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And he was at the heart of it. And they used his own people to show
Yes.
that he was quite conscious of what he was doing, that he was not it was very, and they all knew that they were just pleasing the master is what they were doing. I mean, it is a pretty straightforward story. And if the word gets out, it would be wonderful if a lot of people began to say, well, geez, you know, I missed that. I better watch the next one. That would be a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that you just need to stop that man from ever getting into that position again. And I mean, what he believes in, a lot of people believe in, but that particular man, he's just I talked to a guy in Italy a couple of years ago. He says, just a dangerous man.
Yep.
I wonder how he can inspire such fanaticism that people just think everything he says is true.
Yeah.
My son sent me a video of Tucker Carlson last night saying that everything that that committee said in that thing with Liz Cheney and Ben, whatever his name is, was false. It was all lies.
Yeah, of course. And you know what? They had their chance to have an independent committee. The Republicans had the chance to have a committee that was set up the way the 9/11 Commission was set up. There would be equal representation on both parts, and they talked to Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans squashed that, and they could have had an independent commission that could have taken care of all of that. So when these people say it's a bunch of lies, good, present your own case then. You know? But they'll listen to Tucker Carlson the way we're listening to these people. But I agree with you, Fred. I don't understand how people can be so mesmerized by that son of a bitch. But anyway,
I was,
form of charism that he has.
yes.
yeah.
Again, if you read go.
I think there's some deep wells of dissatisfaction in the country.
Oh, absolutely.
And his political genius has been he's tapped into them.
Yeah.
He doesn't believe anything. He doesn't believe, he's not pro-life. He doesn't believe in anti-abortion or anything. I mean, he was pro-choice. It's what his base believes in that he takes as his own. So he's I'm absolutely astounded. I have some colleagues who supported him, and I said, I'm mystified, setting aside whatever his political positions turn out to be, how a Catholic priest can vote for someone who's such a moral degenerate.
Yeah.
We're all sinners,
Yeah.
but he's asking to be the leader of our country.
Absolutely.
And I think he's a pagan myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And believes only in himself and in money. And how, but he's tapped into this. I mean, there are consequences to have growing income inequality in a country where the top 10% gets richer and richer and richer, and the rest of them, get poorer and poorer and poorer.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton criticized Hillary or advised Hillary early on in 2016 to spend more time with white working class people, and she didn't. She was kind of campaigning in Nevada on the day that of the election, rather than being in those 3 states where she lost.
And
he's tapped into that thing that he's classified liberals as coastal elites who don't care what's happening to the working man in America.
Yeah.
And the working man in America doesn't parse exactly where his trouble is coming from, but responds to that message. That's what
Frank,
I think his magic is.
Yeah, Frank, but has Trump delivered anything to the working people?
No, the only thing he's delivered to them is a voice, and he's given the middle finger to the coastal elites.
Mhm.
That's what he's delivered.
Yeah.
But he's a very elite person in his own right.
Exactly, of course.
Living in Mar-a-Lago, where
Right.
nobody, most of the people who support him could not afford to spend one night in Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
Right. So I think it's kind of an emotional thing rather than a rational thing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Don't you think? Almost like a Jungian archetype. He kind of,
He tapped into something. He didn't convince them that he could make it better. He tapped into their dissatisfaction.
Well, you know, it's interesting to read the biography. I just want to put a plug in for an author who wrote about the 3 generations of Trumps. And Trump was very popular in high school, Donald Trump. He had the gift of gab, you know, the way he talks and his bluster, and he always had women around him, you know, girls that were taken up with him and guys, and just, he has a certain type of, I don't know,
Charisma.
Johnny, what would you call his gift?
Fred
Gifted and
got it.
called
Charisma.
bluster. He has some kind of charisma that's put to bad effect. Yeah. To get his selfish goals. Yeah. But if you read his biography, you'll see that he has it. He just has a way of he's, talking people into things, selling them things, hoodwinking them, and then getting out of it. And, I remember reading about some real estate agents that worked for Trump that he didn't pay. He owed them millions of dollars, but he wouldn't pay, and he gets away with it. He gets his attorneys to go to court and just wear people down. And, but he does have some kind of charisma. I guess the same kind that Putin has.
That's the problem with
Interesting. Yeah.
Fred, what,
the use of the term charisma.
Yeah.
That applies to Hitler. It applies to Trump
yeah.
and any kind of slob, really, who
Yeah.
has this ability to attract people who have that resentment that
Yeah.
Frank was talking about.
And that coupled with a total lack, I agree with you, Frank, a total lack of conscience, a total lack of moral value. There's only one. It's been so clear, and I agree with what Frank you're saying. I told one friend of mine, I said, you and I are both intelligent people. I just don't, and you're a good, committed man. I just don't understand how you can espouse him. I mean, you may like the most people that I know who, and there are a lot of the Republican friends, they don't like him, but they like whatever they called his policies, whatever those. Well, that's because they benefited them, not
Yeah.
because they benefited the rest of the country.
I know a lot of folks, and when I say a lot, 8, 10 maybe,
Oh,
who
yeah.
voted for him and said, I think the guy is just a miserable human being.
Yeah.
But he's very, very committed, it seems, and he proved it after he was elected, to the pro-life stance with respect to abortion. And therefore, so there were a lot of people that held their noses as they voted, I think.
I bet the bishops did the same. I used to say this. Remember, there's a story of Franklin Delano Roosevelt that the United States had some ally in like Nicaragua, some Latin American dictator who was, corrupt and whatever else. And they're having this policy meeting, and the guys are saying, this guy is a son of a bitch. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, yes, he's a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. And I think that's kind of what that sort of attitude, I think, is it explains it for me about the people that I respect who liked him, or at least who liked what he did,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting too that Biden seems not to have that charisma, and the Republicans are playing him down as weak and incompetent.
Well, of course, he's not weak and incompetent. He's doing a good job. He's not getting, although I was going to ask this group, I don't know, eventually, we don't need to get off of this topic yet, but I mean, we do have inflation, and I wonder how much, some guy sent me, just after last week's, our meeting last week, some guy who I wrote him back, I said, don't send me any more of your mindless email, said that, Biden is the reason why the prices in gas are so high, and he's failed at every single thing he's done. And I wanted to, and I left our last week's meeting kind of it was very inspirational. And then I read this email. I said, Ted, you have a way of darkening my days. Don't send me any more of your mindless emails. I said, you know as well as I do, there are more factors involved than Joe Biden and the price of gas. I said, but other than.
And Biden did give a very good, what was it, 27-minute talk on the gun problem. I don't think it got much press.
I don't think he wants, I bet you he's not going to run again. And
Me
I think
too.
he just wants to get the job done that has to be done. That's how I see him.
I think so.
But Trump is just, I don't know.
Well, one of the things I suspect is that people only, when they're voting in many cases, they see the president as being the one who's going to solve their problems.
Yeah.
They don't see him as, in our system, for example, like we were overdosed on the Queen. But the Queen is someone who kind of captures the national spirit. And she's separated from the government. She's the head of state. The prime minister is the head of government. They're two separate people in that system. In our system, they're one.
Right.
And part of the embodiment of who we are as a people that's the Queen kind of represents is supposed to be rolled in to the president of the United States, but people lose sight of that. So for example, we had disasters, and Clinton especially. He was like the national clergyman, the national minister. Yeah. He could go and deal with, yourself, for example, if you go to a particularly tragic wake, much of what the positive effect you have is going to be how you act, not necessarily what you say. What kind of gestures do you include that kind of meaningful for the people, as they go through their grief?
Mhm.
And that's a talent that Clinton had in spades, even though he had his other problems.
Yeah.
But Trump has no ability to do that whatsoever. And so the notion of the president as being more than just a problem solver, but being something of the icon of what it means to be an American is completely lost when you elect someone like Trump.
Yeah.
Frank, didn't you see Trump hugging the flag at his rally?
Hugging what?
Flag.
Didn't you see Trump hugging the flag at his rally?
I know, but that's the only thing he knows how to hug is an inanimate one.
Yeah,
I also saw him push the prime minister of Montenegro out of the way so he could get to the front row.
Oh yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, the way you've articulated it, Frank, it just makes larger for me the huge mistake that we made electing him, because the symbol of America. Wow. God.
Did you guys have the impression that I had that he was very diffident with Putin?
Oh,
That he wasn't a big shot in Putin's presence at all.
right.
So
In the 50s, Senator Arthur Vandenberg, who was from Wisconsin, the Republican senator, was head of the Foreign Relations Committee, coined the phrase "at the water's edge," in which he meant that at home we can argue about everything, but at the water's edge, we're Americans. And for an American president to go to Helsinki and diss the entire American intelligence organization in order that he could protect the leader of the country in the world that wishes us the most ill is treason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're escalating
Exactly right.
in the characterization of him, but it almost seems just very logical. Kind of, yeah.
I think that Trump is a totally self-centered individual.
Mhm.
It's all about how great he is. And so he projects that in a variety of ways. And, he gets up and gives a talk off the top of his head, and he's an entertainer. And he's putting people down left and right if they don't worship him, so to speak, and whatever he thinks of. Now, for my taste, the alternative I think that Biden is a genuine human being.
Mhm.
And when you see how he went to Boston, or not to Boston, but to Buffalo, and then he goes down to Uvalde, he and his wife, and he's just a person, and it's the kind of pastoral presence I think that you were
Right.
talking about, Frank. And then when he talks, he's talking from his heart.
Right.
I mean, he's got his head together and he knows what he's trying to communicate, but it's with a feeling, that he puts on. He is a genuinely good human being. And I think that, the contrast with what we've got, I lost you here, what happened?
Oh, we got
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I'm back. I just think that they so put him down, the press. I find it terrible. And why is it not breaking loose what he's trying to do? Because the Republicans have decided we're not going to let him do anything.
Right.
That's just where they stand. It's McConnell saying, "Oh, well, yeah, we should." It's several months away, but we're just going to wait until we put our own man into the, and they get away with it. They just won't let anything happen that's going to bring credit to Biden and what he's trying to do for the guy. And all you have to do, it seems to me, is take the level of work. I mean, there's an enormous number of people that have, it's the lowest percentage of people looking for work that we've had in a long, long time. And the economy is doing very good. So, Trump, he added to the debt of the nation enormously by his, we're going to do all this wonderful stuff. Biden and the way the economy is run under Biden, they're getting money that they're going to be able to pay it down instead of put it up. So I think that the press in many respects, are not supporting Biden. Not that they need to do that like worshiping him, for sure not, but much more balanced than I think. He's gotten too much attacked without justification.
I think on my Sunday morning in church, if I looked out, he's the guy sitting in the third or fourth row with his family. And in Sacred Heart Church in Uvalde, he went to mass. And apparently what happened was all the seats were taken. And so there was a pregnant woman with a young child. I think she was pregnant, but at any rate, she had a young child. She was kind of looking for a seat. And so Joe Biden pushed Jill and himself over and created the seat so the lady could sit next to him.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine Donald Trump doing that?
Yeah. Biden is
I mean, just
aware of-
the simple, like what you're saying, Bob, the simple human gesture, which is much more powerful many times than what you say. That's why I say Pope Francis is the master of the pastoral gesture.
Remember in this last election for the presidency, when some of these priests got on YouTube and they gave these talks like that stupid guy Altman, that crazy man from from Wisconsin somewhere. But there was some priest down there in Baltimore, I think, Frank. I found out the guy was he's one of those priests that came in, Episcopal priest that came in, under Levada with that Steve Lopes is the bishop of all those
the Anglican vicariate or
the Anglican guy, and he got up and he was denouncing the so-called Catholic Joe Biden for his stance on abortion. But he kept saying, you know, and he says, this is not a political, it was the most political, somebody sent it to me and I watched it and it was vicious, basically. But the way he would say the supposed Catholic, Joe Biden, from a man, a priest who 8 years earlier belonged to the Episcopal Church and is now in the Roman Catholic Church and is spouting all this stuff about a man whose faith carried him through the death of his wife and his 2 daughters when he was a young congressman or senator, whatever. You remember that? And the elusive son? Joe Biden has a faith. You think that man, the one who doesn't have the faith, was that priest getting up there, you know, preaching about, it was pitting his Catholic faith on his particular stance on abortion and totally missing a faith. I don't know how many of the bishops have a faith like Joe Biden does, a personal faith.
He was elected to the Senate when he was constitutionally ineligible to serve at the age of 29. After the election, I know his birthday because it's 3 days before mine, November 20th, 1942, he was born. And so he was elected in early November when he was 29 years old. But because he wasn't sworn in until January 1st, he was constitutionally eligible to take his seat. And it was in that period of time that his wife and daughter were killed in that accident.
Yeah.
It was Mike Mansfield,
2
who
daughters.
was the Senate Majority Leader, who talked him into not resigning from the Senate. He actually said that there was no other way he could raise his 2 injured sons. He was sworn in their hospital room. How do you recover from something like that?
Wow.
That's what I say. I mean, he has.
How do we find a spokesman for Biden if he's not going to stand up and promote himself that way?
Yeah.
But maybe a good leader in the Republican Party. I don't see anybody, a candidate for that. Do you?
In the Republican Party?
The
In the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Certainly not Father Altman.
Biden's not going to do that. He's busy.
No.
He's doing his work. That's what he's doing. You know, he's not touting himself the way that other man did.
By the way, what has happened to Father Altman? Is he getting care or what? He's disappeared from the scene.
Well, he was suspended by his bishop.
I know, but he's still going strong.
Yeah,
you know.
his own little YouTube.
My take on him is that one of the strings on the guitar is loose. And no, seriously, and I wonder whether he's getting care. Because he's disappeared kind of.
Well, he probably has his backer. He probably has people who are supporting him.
He does, to be sure.
I would imagine financially, I would think.
Well, he generated $700,000 or $800,000 as
Right.
soon as he got publicly addressed. So I don't think he's suffering financially.
No,
And he's got, the rabid Catholics that buy into, accept that kind of a person to lead. It seems to me that they keep supporting him. The very conservative Catholics, I think, tend to do that. They want to keep it the way that it was. That priest, and I'm forgetting his name, but he's been involved in the anti-abortion thing, running it, kind of as an independent, although he's got standing in the church. I forget his name now.
Frank
But-
Pavone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's a lot of
Priest
money
for life.
behind his operation.
Mhm.
And he could probably get incarnated in Tyler, Texas. That
Well, he did get ousted by a bishop somewhere. I forget where.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
you mean outside of his own diocese?
I don't think he was serving in his native diocese,
Oh,
but the diocese he was serving in, the bishop discontinued his, unincarnated him.
in
I
the
think he was from Brooklyn.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure if he went to Tyler, Texas, that bishop would accept him
Probably.
because he was criticizing the Bishop of La Crosse. So that bishop was criticizing the Bishop of La Crosse.
Right. He supported Father Altman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, so what, did you guys talk about Barron and what's happened to him last week?
Not all that much. I don't think, I was recently told that he may well have asked for something like the diocese that he was assigned to, because it's close to his mom, who's declining, close to his family. Do you think there's any possible truth to that?
I can't understand what they did with him in the first, why did they, I heard that he didn't get along with Supich, but why did they send him to Los Angeles?
You know, I was down there with we have a classmate, John and Ned and George and I and Tom, named Paul Dotson. He's still active in his, I just talked to him yesterday. Paul is 80 some years and still going strong, I guess. And at the time, Paul was showing me around the, what's the cathedral there? It's Our Lady of the Angels, is that the name of the cathedral?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we had some brother who is in the LA Chancery, and he told us about that's what he told us about Barron. And apparently they just wanted to make him a bishop, and they didn't know where to put him. And LA was it's where Hollywood is, where was a lot of
Show business.
TV stuff.
Yeah,
And then he went to wasn't he in Santa Barbara?
Santa Barbara. Yeah.
And he seems to me to be a guy who, his theology would be not quite the way I understand Vatican II, but I mean, but he's very personable. And Paul told me yesterday that is it Winona,
Yeah.
Minnesota, the University of, there's a university there. It's a very nice, according to Paul, it's a pretty nice area.
And I think Mayo Hospital is there.
Mayo Clinic is there, yeah.
Yeah, Mayo Clinic, yeah.
And the University of Syracuse or University of something or other is there. So it's actually a pretty nice area. Paul thinks it's a stepping stone to Chicago, or pardon me,
New York?
Paul thought it might be, well, I know Paul. What does Paul know? He doesn't know what I do, except he's the kind of guy who remembered everything he ever heard. And then when he hears one thing that he remembers 10 years ago, he hears something else, and all of a sudden they both click. He puts them together. But apparently Winona, whatever it is it's like our diocese, like Santa Rosa. It's a small diocese, so.
It's deep in financial trouble.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
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 In bankruptcy, right?
Well, the bankruptcy is just one section left open. The majority of the bankruptcy has been
Okay. Resolved.
resolved,
Okay.
right? But I sent out, I'm going to donate. Matter of fact, I'm waiting to hear back from the diocese how I can contribute to whatever funding might be needed. Did the rest of you see Bishop Barron clearly said he's at 10% of his time on the
Word on Fire.
Word on Fire, because he's got a studio in Dallas and a studio in Chicago and a team in Santa Barbara that supports him. But George, I think you wondered if he'll be up to the administrative side, and he addressed that, saying, I've got 90% of my time.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't see
did
how
any
that's
of you-
possible. How is that possible? That his work at Word on Fire is so fruitful and he does it at 10% of his time? Really? This is one bright and efficient guy, I guess.
Well, and he's got charisma. We talked earlier, George, about charisma, and he's certainly got it. But I think he's raised enough money to build a team. And I think the administration of Word on Fire says a lot about what he may do for his diocese as well. I pray that's true.
I would imagine it does. But I guess that means he'll be able to run the diocese at 10% of his time.
Only after about 12 years of work, George. It took him that long to do it with Word on Fire.
Yeah.
Well, the NCR has recently reported that there's all sorts of difficulty at Word on Fire. Multiple
Oh,
resignations.
He fired a couple of people for misbehavior.
Mhm.
But I say, good for you. Give him a ribbon, for, and I hope he does the same in the diocese. But
Did
yeah,
any-
I'm back.
Hey, Tom.
Hi.
Hey, Tom,
Hi, George.
welcome
I
back
thought
to
you
your
had been
house.
involved, Tom.
Pardon
All I
me?
saw was a picture of you there. It never moved. I said,
That's right.
"You've been involved."
That's right. So
Hey, Bob, I can't understand why you're wearing a coat in a tropical island.
Well, I'm pretending I'm out on the California coast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's gonna be hot here today. George, is it hot in Berkeley? I mean, it's gonna be hot here.
It is, yeah. It's hot here. It's up in the 80s.
And you're wearing a long sleeve shirt yourself.
Yes, I am. I'm going to change it as soon as this is over with.
Yeah, by noon it'll be 90 in Berkeley also, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oh, it's even 80 here today.
Yeah, but 90 and 95 in California is not the same thing as
Yeah.
95 on the East Coast.
Nope.
And
Yeah.
is George
Good point.
multitasking? George, you can't be looking at us and drive the car at the same time.
Yes, I can. It's just not safe.
But just don't look down into the screen.
How did it go in court, George?
Not well. I gotta tell you. I mean, I won't bore everybody with the details. Judge kept saying, the counsel, I don't understand what you're trying to say here. What do you say? Well, Your Honor, it isn't plain English. No, that's not what you say.
George Farrick, you put a lot of work into feedback for Fred, and I'd sure enjoy hearing a little between the two of you. And Fred, I'm going to try to be a good, active listener, which I think was at the heart of your last 4 pages or so.
Right. Are we off of Bishop Barron for a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just mention one thing. Did any of you see an article that it could be just a rumor, but it said rumors about Pope Francis thinking of retiring. And
Yes.
therefore he may have a master strategy, like a chessboard of, in line with Barron, moving people around to get into places if he does retire. And it said because of physical, I wasn't aware that he's wheelchair bound right now. But
Yeah.
but if so, that would be a wise thing for him to do if he
I
feels
guess
like
he's wheelchair bound, but he also canceled the trip to Africa
Mhm.
in July.
So
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
still going to Canada.
That's a little later, I think. So
It
that
is in July, toward the end.
there.
So is he still going to that?
There's also word that an unannounced planning for a trip to Lebanon has been canceled.
And
He
he was,
Tom,
he was also-
in pain. Did anybody see the video that accompanied one of those articles, he looked like he was in utter anguish.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
guess he's having treatment for it, some kind of shots. But, it's probably one of those bone on bone things.
Yeah, the
Ooh.
article mentioned he was going to visit a little Italian city. Tom, you may know about it, where the Pope had been,
Pope
Celestine.
Celestine the Fifth, yeah.
the Pope would
he's buried.
resign. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one that was put in hell by Dante
Uh-huh.
because he resigned.
Uh.
Now he's canonized.
How could, guys, how could Francis resign, which would make for two emeritus popes out there?
Well,
It's
bet
bad
you-
enough with one.
I bet you Francis, you know what, George? I bet Francis would go back to Buenos Aires and, find a little place to live. That's what I bet you.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a great idea. Yeah.
Whatever he
Yeah,
does,
very well might.
my feeling is if he does resign, he will be far more out of the picture than Benedict has
I
been.
think so. Yeah.
One of the things
I think if he resigns, he will accept the fact that there's no such thing as a Pope Emeritus.
No.
Yeah.
Return to his episcopal name and manner
I
as the
agree.
retired Bishop of Rome.
Yes, I agree.
yeah,
And
And- and
the likelihood of him doing that, I think you're right, the cautiousness of having two of them around. But he won't interfere the way that Benedict has.
That might be a great precedent for the future of the papacy.
perhaps so, but there's one thing that is very much in the back of my mind. Actually, it's not in the back, it's in the front. And that is, if he does resign, what the thing that I would most like to see would be for him to issue a motu proprio with the expressed support of Benedict the 16th. In other words, not really co-signed, but that there be a supportive signature on it. And the content of that motu proprio would be a decree to forbid even the entry of the cause of canonization for a pope until 100 years after he dies.
Yeah.
I mean, we have canonized too damn many of these 20th century popes. And after their canonization, all of these clay feet, human qualities, imperfections, rather dastardly stuff like John Paul II and Maciel, the legionary pedophile, not just pedophile, but
Con man.
yeah, con man, basically. I think they're if the norm throughout history, if you look at the list of the list of popes and the list of those who've been canonized, they are relatively few. We've had more popes canonized in the 20th century than we have since the Reformation.
Yeah, weren't there, somebody pointed out, I can't remember where I read it, that of the 32 first popes, 30 had been canonized. And fairly much after that.
Most of them, it was quasi-automatic because there was no canonization process, but martyrs were kind of automatically seen as
Canonizable.
as people to be venerated, saints to be venerated. So it was different in those days.
Yes, I agree.
I think that that along with John Paul's pension. I mean, he canonized almost more people than anyone else. Either two things have happened, that a lot more people ought to be canonized than have been in the past, or canonization has been devalued.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think the
especially,
latter is the case.
I
Yeah.
think it's especially true with the popes, because we're not just talking since the Reformation. I mean, as Tom pointed out, it's since the Reformation. It's the popes in this past century. It's been focused on, you know, Paul VI, John the 23rd, John Paul II, have basically all been canonized in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And before that, you know, only Pius X. Pius IX hasn't been, you know, and then they used it politically. I mean, they beatified Pius IX on the day they beatified John the 23rd. Why do you think they did that? To appeal to both wings, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the
So
same thing with Paul VI and JP two
Yeah,
on the
and
same.
so, I think the whole thing has been kind of devalued, if you will.
I agree. You know,
Yeah. Well, you know, inflation devalues.
Right.
So, you know, it's hand in hand. They have
Yeah, right.
they have
That's
done,
great.
they have canonized too many, and that automatically devalues canonization. The other thing I noticed with this, and actually I think for per year, well, I'm not sure the exact statistics, but I think that Francis is outdoing John Paul II in canonizations. I don't know the overall number, but definitely the number, let's say if you add them all up and divide them by the years, that I've read in several places. But this last group that was canonized had some really good ones, like what's his name, the Dutchman,
Charles
Oh,
Foucault.
the newspaper.
and Foucault, wasn't it?
Yeah. Charles de
Huh.
Foucault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now those two, you know, but if you look behind them, you've got a whole bunch of very obscure, mostly female, founders of religious orders.
Hmm.
And it's almost a shoo-in for the founder of a religious order to get canonized if the order has enough money.
I was going to say, if they can lobby, if
Yeah.
they are in power for that.
So does all of this argue, along with the teachings of Vatican II about the people of God, to say that the current canonization process is obsolete and ought to be ditched, and that we ought to find some process throughout the church where we can declare and venerate heroic Catholics
Let's hope that gets on
without having
the
universal
agenda.
declaration.
And
Let's
maybe,
hope that gets on the agenda of the Synod of Bishops.
and
That's a
maybe,
great idea.
and maybe that we can recognize heroic non-Catholics.
Right. That's true. Yes.
Martin Luther King.
Now,
Well, I think we'd have to get to one before we got to the other.
yeah,
I mean, the point I'm trying to make is the current process obsolete? Because it's kind of unconnected to anyone's life. And should we have a diocesan process of saying that, you know, after study, no one is perfect, everyone has sinned, we're all subject to the mercy of God. But as far as we know, such and such a person lived their Catholic life beautifully.
Yeah.
And we ought to venerate their memory.
I think that prior to whenever the current process was instituted, and I think it was, you know, sometime after the Reformation, I think prior to that, canonization was often a diocesan process that then filtered up to the universal church. I'm not an expert on
So
it.
that's ressourcement.
Yeah,
And maybe too, you could canonize married couples for being married couples.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Being married and doing what married people do, and not for living as brother and sister for the last 25 years of their life. Whatever that Italian couple, remember there was an Italian couple that was made saints because they, for 25 years, they decided after however many kids they had, they would live as brother and sister the rest of their lives. I mean,
Right.
think about married people who are married people who lived out their sacramental life. I had a wedding, 60-year anniversary renewal with all 12, the parents and all their 12 kids were there. And if that was not a moment of grace, I'd never had one, to be with all of them as they are. And Carolyn, I love Carolyn. She's a pain in the ass in a lot of ways. She's 80-some years old and has more ideas for you to do than the man in the moon. But she and her husband Tom believe deeply in, they love each other powerfully. She said, when I die, I want to have my nightgown on because I ain't getting up. I'm going to bed. Done.
Great line.
They are, I remember Tom saying to me, you know, he says, I can think of no greater joy on this earth than that of a successful marriage. I mean, and he was echoing, you know, they wanted me to read, remember that thing? I don't know, Tom, it came out, it was before our time when we were ordained, all of us, that the marriage ceremony had that homily by that, is it Monsignor Lamb, you know, only love can make it easy. And
Yeah, sacrifice is usually difficult and irksome.
yeah.
Only love can make it easy, and only perfect love can make it a joy.
Well, I read that. That's what they wanted me to read. It was easy for me to get. It was, as I read it, I'm looking at this couple married 60 years, and all 12 of their children and their spouses were there. Not all 12 of the kids have been married in the church. They're modern kids. But as I read that, I said, this is it's powerful. That homily it's powerful. And you saw it lived out in this couple's lives, you know. So maybe we could canonize people like that.
Mhm.
I mean,
parents
all
of-
of us have, you know, how many times have many of us referred to someone that we know or someone in our parishes, they're a saint.
Yes, absolutely.
And
I've got to guess, if you've heard confessions for years, that's
true.
the case.
That's true.
Yeah, you know,
I mean, I was away from hearing confessions for 40 years and never realized when I was a young priest, like I do now, what faith and goodness resides in the Christian people who come to confession.
yeah, I've always wondered how priests can be so distant from the lives of married folks, you know, just folks, when they hear confessions. And how do they hear them? How do they incorporate them? How do they respond to them? And if they do, in some kind of an effective, you know, presence, how do they not know how people are out there, you know, living, hurting, suffering, and yet persevering? Frank, you should be, I mean, it would seem to me that you would be a wonderful resource for teaching that kind of stuff. And the way you've been talking, Gary, you've got it. And that's just, there's a whole lot of wonderful priests, great homilies, you know, very active, getting a whole bunch of things done. But that understanding of the resolutions that married people have to go through over and over and over, the teachings. There was a psychologist, Harville Hendricks, who was a pastor. Have you heard of him, Tom?
No, I may have. But
He was divorced and said that was one of the hardest things he's ever been through, and has written since a whole bunch of books about how the marriage life is one that certainly would produce saints as it's lived through and worked through and suffered through.
Marriage is a sacrament.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a sacrament. I mean, I don't know what people think when you say it's a sacrament, what that means. It just means they've lived out where do they find God except in the love that they share with each other. And that love is not just a sweet sexual thing.
That's for sure.
You know, I mean, from what I've seen, Frank, you've seen both sides of the coin, but I mean, heck, you know, I go home. I mean, people said, Father, you have such, it's okay. I said, you know what, when I have a problem with somebody, I can go home.
You know, you really begin to know that love is not an emotion.
Yeah.
It's wonderful when it's accompanied with those emotions, but it's an act of the will to love someone and want their good and work for that. That's just an act of the will that you need to follow, as any saint needs to follow God's will. So you really learn that. We've been married 52 years.
I
Go ahead.
think our theology of marriage can help us to understand the sacramentality of it and the effect of the sacrament, because I think it's really, it has a lot to say. You know, marriage as a sacrament, they say the priest is not the minister of the sacrament. The husband and wife are the ministers to each other. And what that really means is that they are part of their self-gift to each other is their baptismal relationship with Christ. So it's not a big vat and vat of grace, and marriage is another spigot to get a little extra grace. But there's the sacrament of matrimony. But it is actually, the source of it is that the husband and the wife's relationship, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ through baptism, living with Christ's life and empowered to perform Christ's work, to be and act Christ towards the other. That's the grace of the sacrament. And to me, that is just absolutely mind-blowing.
I agree.
And
Well, I think too that as a sacrament, what's interesting about it is that biblically, in the Old Testament, in the book of Hosea, and in the New Testament in St. Paul, it is a model by which we understand the relationship in the Old Testament to God and the people of Israel, and in the New Testament between Christ and the church.
yeah,
That's a fundamental kind of aspect and emphasis in marriage that I think sometimes is lost.
Absolutely.
At least in our preaching, sometimes is lost.
Absolutely.
And then the other part is that, you know, the contract, the civil contract is a 50-50 deal. You get what you sign up to, I get what I sign up to, but the covenant is 100-100.
Right.
And that's the real essential difference. Now, you know, it's all not rose. For instance, I know that, for instance, my wife was disabled for the last 12 years of her life. She had a stroke, and I was her caregiver 24/7. And I remember days in which I had to say, I wanted to see what kind of spiritual insight would capture what happened to us. And I went through all the things about the sufferings of Christ, et cetera, and nothing worked until my old Baptist neighbor said to me one day, Frank, I admire your ministry to Janice. And it was ministry.
Yeah.
So that when I got and was tempted to get impatient, and caregiving is not easy, tempted to get impatient, ministry would click in. And so it's a mutual ministry as well as everything else. And that gets you through the ups and downs of it. you know, my wife and I used to laugh. We'd read an obituary where a couple said they've been married for 40 years and they've never had a disagreement. And we would say,
Go to
either
confession.
either they're lying or it's been dreadfully boring.
Mhm.
One or the other.
But it's the notion, for instance, the special tone to the sacrament, Gary, I think, is that it models the relationship between Christ and the church.
Yeah, I would add,
And the result of that for Trinity Sunday is that the intimate and full expression of that intimacy results in the third person.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's.
And if you have not seen Bishop Barron's homily from Pentecost on the Trinity, it validates just what you said, Frank. And the grace that flows, Tom, did you put it that way? The grace that flows out of the big vat of grace is the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And that's that love.
Yeah, well, I say there's no big vat of grace.
Right.
It is that the presence of the husband and the wife to each other is the presence of Christ to each other because of their own relationship with Jesus Christ, you know, and identification with him. Now, that does lead to all the things that Frank was saying, as the relationship being the model of Christ to his church and so on. But, you know, the source of that grace, in other words, the source of that grace, I would say theologically, the source of that grace for the wife is the husband's relationship to Christ. The source of that grace for the husband is the wife's relationship to Christ.
And it's the Holy Spirit acting in both of them that.
And the Holy Spirit then is uniting. Yeah.
You know, what you're saying about the model of Christ in his church, I just like the other way around. I like the idea that marriage is the image of what the relationship is between Christ and the church.
Yeah.
You know, that with people who understand married life understand better what the relationship of Christ and us is about, you know.
Yeah.
But it's funny you should bring up about the Trinity, Frank. That I'm preaching. I have mass in a little town this weekend in the Napa Valley, Calistoga, and I'm working on a homily. And I dig out my old ones. Thank God I have them. But and I've always used that image. You know, the Father, the Son beget a third person. You know. But there was a talk, Michael Himes gave a talk one time. It was in a series that we used on the Trinity. He talked about how the Trinity is the shape of the creed. You know, we don't say in the creed, we believe in the Trinity. We believe in the Father, we believe in the Son, we believe in the Holy Spirit. And he talks about how God relates to us as the Father and as the Son and as the Holy Spirit. So I'm kind of, when this is done, I get to work on this and then figure out how to say it in Spanish.
You know, Tom, I don't know if you guys have tapped into the homilies that Tom has given his congregations. Some of them are wonderful. Not that all of them aren't.
Well, all of them aren't. Some of them are.
Yeah, but some of them. I mean, with respect to marriage, I think you've really hit it. Why don't bishops? Why don't leaders who are priests talk with the other priests and tell them how utterly important it is to bring all of these abstract kinds of, the Trinity? How people don't understand the Trinity, and if the homilies that you guys have been talking about right now were exposed, were proclaimed, married couples would feel so much more supported and based in a foundation that's divine, and would hopefully take a whole lot of comfort and strength and courage from that.
Let me be a little bit of an outlier here, but I think the traditional, presentation of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit, is not what married people experience. They experience husband, wife, child, and it's a male thing. Many people have fathers who have been abusive. There's also abusive mothers, but I think I would be very tuned into, Gary, when you talk to the people, be aware of the fact that some people do not experience that type of relationship. And women may feel out of the picture when you talk about it's the love between the son and the father. I think it's important to say that this is a word that came, it's not that, God is beyond gender,
Yeah.
correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a way that came because you could trace it back to maybe a patriarchal society. If for some reason there had been a matriarchal society, it might be mother. So I just think it's more complex, and I think people find it hard to relate to the father and the son begetting the spirit. It's usually the father and the mother, the husband and the wife begetting a child. That's usually the experience in a marriage. And then some marriages don't have children either. So that's another aspect of it.
I totally and absolutely agree with that, George. We need to keep at the forefront the fact that whatever these names are, they fall far short of the reality. And we've got to try our best to transcend the limitations that the names and images actually place on our understanding.
And I think that may bring us to an appreciation of the devotion to Mary throughout the years that helps to balance a bit of that.
Well, I do agree with that, but Tom, what you said about transcendence, I think that's the goal in preaching about marriage. And however it's done, God is not, it's way beyond gender. The traditional way is historical, whatever, but some of us are so bound to a more surface understanding of things. Here we have a wife and husband, and they have all of these struggles. They have children, the fruitfulness of the marriage, their teaching, and all of that seems so, or is presented or assumed that it's just something that's got to be struggled through, and in fact, it needs to be understood as the becoming holy, participating in the grace and the life of God, and transcended, so that we don't have to worry about the personal pains that people have had because of gender roles that have been assigned, or he's transcendent, but he's also immanent, and all of that stuff. I think marriage is such a fallow ground for the teaching of the whole of Christianity. And I think sometimes, Tom, you're really hitting it well. And I'm sure, Gary, given the way you are able to weave concepts in your homilies, as I've experienced, it would be wonderful to hear that kind of thing.
I was just looking at my notes from there was a series called Forward in Faith, and they have a series of, we do this with our parish. And it is a video, and it's Michael Himes, who's a colleague of Fred Lawrence's at Boston College.
Oh, could I just, I told Frank earlier that today we just heard that Michael Himes died,
Did he pass away?
Ooh.
He was ill.
Oh, my.
seriously ill for quite a while.
But he gave this talk on Trinity as the shape of our faith. And he says any way we speak about the Trinity is inadequate. So he says, here's another inadequate way. And he says, and I said, he says, the Trinity describes three ways that God is. Three ways of God, of relating. God does not have a relationship, but God is a relationship. And he says, so he relates to us in three ways. God is creative. And he says, being creative is not what God does, it's what God is. You know, and it's what relationship we mean. It's what the relationship is when we call God Father. And then God is redemptive, you know, being a healer, being redemptive, being a channel of salvation is what God is. And it's the way, as it is incarnated, how we speak about God as the Son. And God is unifying and energizing and being the consoler, being the uniter, being the builder of unity and community is the way that God is. And that's how we speak of God as the Spirit. It's just a different way of, he says, all these things are what God is. And it's really kind of how we understand God. So it gets kind of away from Father, Son, and Spirit to more how we experience. I think, you know, we obviously don't understand the Trinity, but we experience it.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what Himes was saying. I'm sorry that he's passed away. He was brilliant. Fred, you knew him.
Yes.
Brilliant theologian, I think.
His nickname for
And a
me,
great teacher.
his nickname for me is God loves ya.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that once before.
Just to go back to this comparison or use, I don't think we should forget the importance of using analogy as long as we are clear about both the similarity and the difference.
Right.
And also, when I was talking about marriage as the model of the life of the Trinity, you start with marriage. You don't start with the life of the Trinity as being the model for marriage.
Yes.
You start with marriage
Yes.
as being something that will help you understand or appreciate or experience the life of the Trinity. And, you know, any analogy is going to have imperfections and that kind of thing, but I'm not sure that the solution to the imperfections is to shy away from using it.
I agree.
I remember one time I was doing a funeral for a cousin of ours, and I had another cousin, Don Valpredo, who's a big rancher in the valley. And I was using the Gospel of John, where, you know, unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it is just a grain of wheat, but if it dies, it produces much fruit. And after the funeral, my cousin Donnie said, Gary, a grain of wheat does not produce fruit. I said, Don, I said, it's just give Jesus a break. That's right. That's how it, yeah.
My mother used to tell this story in Ireland. There was this kind of crazy priest. And one day he got up and he was going on and on about there'll be waving and gnashing of teeth. And he's repeating it till some old lady in the front row who didn't have a tooth in her head said, faith in Father, but then that have him gnash him.
Coach Grip looks very professional today.
Welcome back, George.
Thank you.
I think Ferrick is with us, just not,
Can't see his
Yeah,
picture.
he's in the middle of my screen. It's just George's.
What,
iPhone.
am I still there?
Black.
You're there, but
Picture isn't.
your picture is not, George.
Oh, the picture's not there?
Right.
I wonder what happened to it.
it just says George's phone is talking.
Moby got it.
It might have
Man
been
with
the
no
wind.
head.
Could we go back to, I don't know if you talked about this before I came, but the little video clip that George Ferrick sent to us by Brene Brown.
Didn't see it, but I'd like to hear about it.
She basically says, you know, you gotta listen. So very often when, and this is a question that's been brought up a couple of times about the training that priests get to deal with the problems of people in confession. You know, what we were trained in confession was to see simply a catalog of sins, and you get this sin and you apply this penance to it. And, you know, it's sort of like the best that we do in our relating to people is seeing people as problems to be solved.
Mm.
And you know, she makes the point that, you know, listening to people isn't just hearing their opinions or hearing them describe an emotion. It is listening to their story. You know,
Tom, what I got out of that too is that, you know, I used to use the expression of walking in another person's moccasins or,
yeah,
you know, but she kind of discounts that and says, no, you can't walk in another person's shoes. Ask them what it's like. Tell, you know, when they say
Precisely.
something, say, tell me more about that.
yeah, precisely.
Yeah, tell me more about
And you know
that.
what, like when it comes to divorce, here are people who have gone through a trauma in their lives, and we're forbidding them from tapping the sacramental source of their lives. And you know, we're dealing with the problem of divorce as a problem, maybe even a barrier, but we're not actually paying attention to the person, the person's reality.
Right.
And I think synodality, you know, if it's going to mean anything, it's going to be a long process of beginning to pay attention to one another's reality.
What do you think, Tom, you've experienced this, George Ferrick, I mean, you've done mediation. I mean, all of us have been involved in people's lives in different ways. And certainly as a priest, and that's why in that, when you ask about, you know, I don't have a clue what it's like to be married. I don't, you know, but I also don't know what is a clue. I don't have a clue what it's like to, for a lot of, I mean, I can experience what it's like to have my own kind of experience, but you know, but not being married, I don't understand what it's really like to be a person who's within that. But I can just be with a person. You know, Francis talks about being a accompaniment.
Mhm.
I think,
Yeah.
I think half of the deal. You know, remember our classmate Charlie Herbelin? We have a classmate,
Yeah, Charlie
Yeah.
Herbert. Yeah.
Herbelin. He
Yes.
lives up in Eureka, and he never. I think Ned. I don't think Charlie ever became a deacon. I think he
did.
did. He become a deacon? Then he
Yes,
met
he did.
Maggie and did not go on. But he got very deeply involved in counseling. He was, in fact, was
Yes.
involved in child protective services. But
Yes.
I remember when I was in Eureka, he was in my parish, and one time we were talking about, I was talking about somebody who would come in with some sort of whatever, and Charlie said, "Gary, did you try to help them? Help him or whoever it was?" I said, "Well, yes." He says, "No, but did you try to help him?" I said, "Well, I didn't know how to help him." I said, all I could do was just listen to what the person had to say and try to be." He says, "Then that's what I mean. You didn't try to help him." He says, you helped him, but you didn't try to help him, you know? And I think it just listening, you know, we all know this, that when you talk to someone, half of it, just what you're saying, Tom, if you just listen to them.
Yeah.
And then try to be with them in whatever they're going through.
That presence is so utterly important that if you don't have that presence, you may simply be a machine, handing out penances and exulpere operato, I guess. But that presence, I know when people die, it's so difficult to say anything that makes any sense to a whole bunch of folks. But if you sit next to them and hold their hand, and that's it.
That's what you can do.
Wow. They begin to cry. All kinds of stuff comes out that words would have held back. Wow.
George Farag, isn't one of the worst things you can say to somebody when you're dealing with
Oh,
their pain is tell them, don't cry?
oh,
Yeah, that's for sure. There's a very good, going back to Brene Brown, she's a kind of a, I don't know what she is, kind of a therapist, but she did give a sermon at the National Cathedral in DC. But anyway, she has a little 3-minute video called Sympathy versus Empathy. If you just put it in YouTube and put sympathy versus empathy, it's a wonderful little video that kind of shows how people can think that they're being empathic, but they're not. It's like the governor of Texas that said, wow, more could have been killed. More could have been killed in this shooting. Do you recall that quote of Governor Abbott?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't make people feel very good. That's not a very empathic, you know what he means, but it's not very appropriate to, if you're sitting next to a parent who was one of the ones who lost their child. So I found that little 3-minute video pretty interesting. And it kind of gets down to what you're saying, that sometimes it's just being there with the person that says, I can't even imagine what you must be feeling.
Yeah.
Something like that may be the empathic thing, instead of saying, oh, I know what you feel like, because some people get into their own loss and they start talking about that.
Yeah.
And then that's really off base.
Yeah. You recommended that to us some time ago, George, and I agree. It's really effective, I thought.
Yeah, isn't it good? That's a good little piece there. But that does get to the synod, and I think it's too bad that they couldn't have invented another name for synod, because synod is a very technical name, right? If you really, it's something that's not self-obvious, but something like dialogue or something like listening sessions or storytelling, something that brings that out. So Fred, what I mentioned at the end of your paper, if you can, you mentioned some of the problems that church members and leaders have with the synod because they have a top-down idea of it, so they don't have much credence in the outcome of it. What could be done how could it be broadcast? And maybe some bishops are doing it, as opportunities for telling and listening.
Well, I thought whoever shared the homily of Bishop McElroy or Cardinal McElroy on the synod, it's clear that that's the way he operates in his diocese.
Yeah.
And I think it has, since we've been talking about it, an awful lot to do with listening. I always remember that phrase by E.M. Forrester, and I forgot which novel, but he uses the phrase, poor little talkative Christianity. And I thought I'd add, the religion that always talks but never listens. Yeah. That's an exaggeration, of course, but there's
Not
something
much.
true about the impression that E.M. Forrester had about Christianity. And I think that's tremendously important. So I think it has to do with a pattern of advice and consent where people who aren't at the top of the pyramid are listened to and taken seriously, because and that they are listened to because your whole attitude for them is conversational.
Mhm.
So conversational means it's an exchange. We mutually mediate each other,
Mhm.
even if we do an awful job with each other. And because, as Frank often mentions, we're all sinful. We all have these tremendous limitations and hangups from way back. And so there's the other thing of knowing that that's true. We need each other's help.
Absolutely.
We have to admit that we need each other's help, and we should be grateful for each other's help. And as you've just been talking about in terms of the empathy question, that's a key thing, that you're able to. We were talking about Bill Clinton earlier, and one of the guys who was in charge of a lot of different presidential campaigns said about Clinton, when he goes into a room, he can kind of tell what everybody in that room feels. So he had a tremendous capacity for empathy, even if he was a jerk. I think that's a tremendous thing, and that's what I'm emphasizing, that conversations don't have to be just on the side of the people listening to the people at the top, but people being able to talk to the person on top, and the person on top being willing to listen. So in other words, more or less, as if you read my thing, it's more or less not quite a diatribe, but it certainly is a critique of the fact that the church, having become Christendom at the time of when Constantine became a Christian, that idea of Christendom was really an idea that was patterning the pattern of the church on Roman law. And Roman law is basically built for bureaucracy. And so the church came by it innocently, but the structures of bureaucracy really are not great for conversation. And so that's kind of the thing I was trying to emphasize. As if you've seen what I wrote, I took a lot from what people said and I had heard on my own about Monsignor Hawks. He was a bureaucrat, and bureaucrats can be wonderful at some things. Like, he was wonderful in helping McIntyre to get the finances for the expansion of the material basis for the rapidly growing Los Angeles Archdiocese before it split up into two dioceses. He was good at that, and that was great. But when he dealt with, as you guys attested to so many times, when he had to do with interpersonal relationships, his bureaucratic way of handling them just was inadequate. And that was that's what he did well, but it was really inappropriate for interpersonal relationships. And so that's what I was kind of getting at. We're not individuals.
Did a good job also, Fred, of explaining what both McIntyre and Hawks did before they became clergy.
Right. I think that was a marriage born in heaven.
Fred,
Fred, do you think
Not entirely.
Lower
apropos-
level of heaven.
Not entirely apropos of our previous discussion of
That's
marriage.
true. That's true.
but Fred, would you, I was just thinking as you're talking about listening, and I'm trying to think about if I were a bishop and I was in a listening session and I'm listening to people, but I should be able to be free enough to say, sharing my story about what it's like to be a leader or pastor, as I hear what you, and I'm thinking to myself, here I am now, I've got this role as the leader of the teacher of the faith or whatever administrative role. And this is what I'm struggling with, about how do I exercise my own function and at the same time pay attention to what's, do you know what I mean? That that in the list, that the person on top also has a story. As a person on the top.
Yeah.
You know,
And
my,
then trust is produced there. Like
Yeah.
you said last week, Fred, trust is so
Yeah.
key.
my brother-in-law, back when he was bishoping, would do that, Gary. He'd be in meetings and it was like, all right, now I'm going to tell you how I feel.
Exactly.
And somehow by his body language and voice and all of that, what he conveyed was, and that's just as important as what you said,
Exactly.
you know, because a lot of laity, I think, would tend to dismiss that. We're not here to listen to you, you're here to listen to us
No,
and
no,
our concerns.
no, but I mean, synodality is, we listen to each other.
Yeah.
George Farrick appeared. Imagine.
Welcome back, George.
I discovered the problem.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I was listening to you all and I discovered it.
Yeah. Well, the other night I had dinner. I went to an 8th grade graduation party of some friends of mine. They're Palestinians, Jordanians. And in fact, Sumaya Maganim, her father, Saeed, and his wife, Margaret, were there. And they had been there earlier for their young son, Omar's confirmation a couple of months ago. And Saeed was telling me about, they had gone to Mar-a-Lago where he met Donald Trump. And I just held my tongue. He said, he's a very nice guy. I said, I'm glad to hear that, But I was talking to her about, there was some problem at the school. We have 2 schools in the parish and she's had a problem with the current pastor. And I say, Sumaya, I'm so glad that I retired, before your kids got a little older, because I just know that you and I would have had a problem. You would have had me between a rock and a hard place. I just know it. She says, but we would have talked about it, wouldn't we? I said, well, I suppose we would have.
Good for you.
But it's that kind of dialogue that I mean. When a person who's in the top can also say, as Jerry Barnes would say, yeah, but here's what I'm struggling with then, in my position. That would be, if it's the kind of synodality that I think Francis is talking about, it's a two-way. I mean, everybody's, and I think that's healthy. I mean, I wish the bishops. I was having dinner. By the way, Bob Bernard, I had dinner with John Wester the other night, and he said to say hello to you. But I told him, I said, I think you guys should just meet and do synodality with each other.
That would be novel, wouldn't it?
Well, one of the things that I think is important in synodality, first of all, I think it's a radical paradigm change. I think Fred is right that we're talking eons here, from the Constantinian bureaucracy. I've been reading this book by Ormond Rush. He's an Australian priest, called The Vision of Vatican II. One of the things he talks about is the difference, like between Trent and Vatican II, is the difference between seeing Revelation as a series of documents and statements handed out, and seeing Revelation as an event, which is built on a relationship.
Mhm.
So that you know, the word of God isn't simply what you hear. It's what you experience, the grace that comes forward and the relationship that's formed. And I think this is the paradigm that we're trying to capture, or that Francis is trying to capture in synodality. And I see it as having a quasi-liturgical emphasis in terms of him trying to teach the church that this is how the Holy Spirit operates. And that in the listening process on both ends of the relationship, the Holy Spirit arises. And so it's, like I say, not just the New England town meeting, but there's a quasi-liturgical, maybe even, well, quasi-liturgical aspect to it. It says that this is the way, one of the primary ways that we have to experience the Holy Spirit in the church going forward.
Can't agree.
Well,
more.
you know, the January 6th hearing, which we discussed earlier at the beginning of our conversation, really has to do with a lot of listening. We were all listening as
It's
we
called
viewed
a
it.
hearing, is it not?
I don't know if it's, yeah,
Yeah, they
I don't
are.
know what it's called, but they did a lot of hearing. You know, the commission was hearing, and now they're bringing people to us so we can hear them. You know, hear the filmmaker, hear the policewoman, hear hear Liz Cheney. You know, we're all listening, and then we're sorting things out. You know, they're not telling us what to think. They're just saying the data that they've come up with, and yeah, so a lot of listening is going on. So maybe that's what a good example of the synod in a way.
George,
Except I think the additional point is that the grace of the Holy Spirit arises in the church through this process.
Well, it also arises anonymously in these other processes too.
That's
People
true.
who aren't Catholic.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's true.
Yes.
I mean, but
right.
it professedly arises in the church,
Yes.
but by the grace of God arises in other ways as well.
Yes.
I agree.
But
George.
knowing how to listen is a real art also. I liken it, I had cataracts taken out of both my eyes, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, learning how to listen is like getting those cataracts out and seeing all of a sudden what you've been missing, the resolution of outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, I'm going to have to
Yeah, there were
leave.
whole
I have
courses.
another webinar to get
Okay.
involved with for Ohio. So thanks. Wonderful.
Have a great time.
Okay, Bob, great to see
Thank
you.
you.
Bob,
Bye, Bob.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. And all of you.
Thanks.
I love your tropical
Thank you.
setting.
Yeah, I love it. I'm wearing a coat.
yeah, speaking of settings, George, am I the first person to congratulate you on the sublime color coordination between your hat and your umbrella?
From the
It was
city.
I think
totally,
you went through 2 or 3 hats, didn't you, George?
no, I went to an event a week ago called Pints for Paws by the Berkeley Humane Society. They had a couple dozen breweries come in and
Oh,
food trucks, and you made a donation for a ticket for the Berkeley Humane Society. So I got this cap, it says woof on it.
yeah.
And so that's where this came from. Yeah.
You know, I just looked at the clock. I tried to find earlier and I couldn't, but by the end of the day, I'll try, and if not today, tomorrow, to send everybody a photograph that was taken of my brother-in-law visiting an elderly Mexican lady in San Antonio. She was 100 at the time. She's now deceased. And he saw in her, as he has in so many, call them ethnic peoples, a closeness to God that was sacerdotal almost.
Mm.
And she's giving him her blessing. which is a lot of old Mexican ladies I've known and Ned have done that, right, Ned?
Absolutely.
But you ask them, may I have your bendición? And they'll say, oh yeah, sure. And I mean, they're not unaccustomed to the notion that they could give you a blessing. Whereas an Anglo would go, huh? What, huh? But I'm going to try to find this picture because it's just a grand picture of him receiving a blessing from an old woman. You wouldn't expect that, but I hope I can find it.
Let's send it to Corleone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's got to be just foaming. I mean, what's his face? Our new cardinal from San Diego. It's got to be like a fuck you, Corleone, from Francis. I mean,
Well, and then what's the deal with Phoenix? Did what's his name retire, or was he sort of edged
he
out? Or
retired.
what?
He retired.
And so McElroy's
Dolan.
assistant bishop is now the ordinary of a larger and more important city than San Diego.
well, what city is that? You say Phoenix?
Yes.
Phoenix, yeah,
I think it's the fastest growing city in the United States.
I
Actually.
think so.
That's just insane. Have you ever been there in June? Not to mention August.
I have.
Where do you get that information? Do you read? I stopped reading Whispers in the Loggia years ago.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, he stopped writing it.
I heard him speak once. Oh God,
Is he awful?
just awful. No rhyme or reason. Just blah 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 blah.
Is he no longer doing Whispers in the Loggia?
I don't know. I never.
No, he
listened.
isn't. He's acted. Most of what he does now is tweet.
Oh, tweet.
Yeah, and but
That's for the birds, right?
right. Well, it's for twits.
What do you think is happening in Phoenix, Tom?
I don't know. I just saw this in I think it was a comment in the NCR.
It was in
Either the
NCR.
NCR or Crooks, one or the other.
Tom, let me ask you canonically now. Remember Olmsted excommunicated that nun
Mhm.
who was in that hospital where they made that decision about
Abortion.
now with him retiring. I didn't realize by the way, he comes from the same diocese as my bishop, Basha. They came from Lincoln. And now, does she continue to be excommunicated?
I thought they cleared that up a long time ago.
Didn't Pope Francis give priests the faculty of forgiving that sin and therefore lifting the excommunication?
Well, if it's a sin, but I think even a formal lifting of an excommunication doesn't make news.
Right.
The imposing of it does. Before we go, because it is that time, I do need to ask, how did the start of the meeting go? Who came on first? Who's on first?
Frank and Fred.
Frank and Fred.
Oh.
And compliments to you that it was so friendly, Tom. It worked.
Yeah, there was no problems with this segue of not being there.
And you didn't have to worry about a waiting room.
No,
Should
No.
I
it was
should I
direct.
just cancel that waiting room stuff because I can?
Yeah, it was direct. We just came on directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
When
think
I
I'm going,
joined-
I think I'm going to do that so that you don't have to wait for the host
Let you
to
in.
let you
Well,
in.
but one has an opportunity to recollect oneself and all that good stuff.
Thank you, George. little
George, you have to look at
contemplative
yourself
there.
before you press the join
And
button.
Tom, did you enjoy Cambria?
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for doing the,
It was mostly,
good.
yeah, and I was grateful that the house we were staying at had a good internet connection too. And,
I just can't accept that pronunciation though. It
Cambria,
Cambria?
has to be Cambria.
Cambria.
why?
I
Why
don't know why. This doesn't
It-
sound right.
It's Welsh, isn't it?
Yeah,
Cambrian Airlines, Welsh.
yeah. Well, I think hoity-toity people associate it with Cambridge.
Hmm.
I don't know. What is interesting, when I first inquired about the pronunciation, it seems that Cambria is more the pronunciation of people in the East Village. And the West Village, which is newer, more people say Cambria.
oh no, not another division.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of experienced that in my time there, that yeah,
Interesting.
there's a division among the people there as to how to pronounce it.
Well, that says you're a good listener, Tom, that you paid attention.
Huh?
Why not just say it has two ways of pronunciation, and that will settle it.
Yeah, forget about it.
Yeah,
Dual-
that's a big deal.
Dual thinking.
It has two ways of pronunciation, the correct one and yours. Anyway, on that happy note,
On that happy note,
I will not be here next week. I will not be on the Zoom meeting. I do have a funeral next Friday. That actually down in Lancaster, there at the
oh yeah,
cousin of mine died about a month ago. They're having the funeral now. So I'll be,
Yeah.
I mean,
Tom, do you want to lead us in a prayer?
okay. Lord, thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing our stories as you have shared your story with us as well. Help us as we go forth into whatever our particular rest of our days activity may be. Help us to continue to listen as you have allowed us to listen and respond to, enter into true dialogue with each other. Help us to carry this on in all the aspects of our lives as we together walk towards the fulfillment of your love in your eternal kingdom through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, guys.
Bless you all.
Thank you,
Good
Tom.
life.
God bless everybody.